For thousands of years we've wondered and wandered throughout our planet in hopes of discovery. And for thousands of years, we've been persecuted, blocked, and robbed of many truths. This initiative is designed to allow us the ability to explore the universe uninhibited and unbiased. We will create our own expedition to the ends of the earth and beyond, from the study of the paranormal, cryptozoology, portals to other dimensions, and the depths of our oceans. It is time we the people take back our freedom and our power to explore without end. Finding Enoch isn't simply a name, it's a movement, giving us all control over the amazing prospects of what we can uncover if we truly work together to tear down the walls of obfuscation.
All right, welcome to Finding Enoch, Episode 3, Portals to Other Worlds. What I want to cover is the fact that obviously for thousands of years humans have had this idea or fascination with stargates, portals to other worlds, to the afterlife, to other dimensions, to visit their dead ancestors, for gods to enter the world or to leave this world. Just methods of traveling back and forth from here to another place. And you find them all over the planet. And that's what we're going to get in today. So I'm going to go through a list of different locations. I'm going to show you guys some images of these supposed stargates or portals. Some places they're called false doors. They range anywhere from Egypt to Sardinia to Turkey to Sedona, Arizona, to Petra. There's a lot in Egypt, and we'll go through a few different ones, and they're in different locations in Egypt. In Peru, Amaramuru, it's one of the most popular ones, and it's a giant doorway carved into the side of a cliff face with a smaller doorway. I think it's a little over 6 feet tall, carved inside of that. And that's my favorite one. And the reason being is not only because people have experienced some interesting things there, but because in the center of that smaller doorway is a disc-shaped carving. And I've read and heard that the elders from this location have stated that that circular depression that was carved in the stone used to be used by the elders or those in the know to place a golden disc inside that depression, which then opened up this doorway or portal. Then they were able to travel in and out. People have disappeared there and never returned. A group of musicians disappeared there, never returned. Priests used to disappear there and never return. That's why it's my favorite. It's got more information on it that we know of. In Egypt, they're called false doors, right? And these were entrances and exits to the afterlife. They were means for the gods that the Egyptians worshipped to come into the world and to leave after they had come for whatever reason. If you look at the intricacy and the detail and how difficult it must have been to precisely carve these doors into solid granite, into other stone of different hardness on the Mohs scale, they obviously cared about them enough to pay homage, or they really believed in them, or they really used them. There may be some lost technology that we haven't discovered yet. Again, I believe a lot of it has to do with sound frequency. Hey guys, so new me had to butt in on old me. I was doing some research on Skinwalker Ranch, and I stumbled across a clip where Travis Taylor and the team that's working at Skinwalker now brought in Colonel John Alexander. They wanted to get his input because apparently he had worked with the NIDS team, which worked for the previous owner, Bob Bigelow. I don't know how many years ago. I think it was well over a decade, maybe close. I think back in the 90s, I'm assuming, or early 2000s. The point is that when they sat down at the table to discuss what Travis and the team had found. I was interested because they were talking about portals that had been seen on the ranch. That's what this episode's about. Lucky for me, that exact episode they discussed with Colonel Alexander the fact that they were registering with a spectrum analyzer 1.6 gigahertz frequencies, RF frequencies. It was really cool because Colonel Alexander said that's the exact frequency that they had encountered most frequently during their research. And it always occurred on the spectrum analyzer when they were observing things in the sky, maybe orbs floating, distortions floating through the trees, and portals. So what I plan on doing because of this, I did a little more research on the importance of 1.6 gigahertz, right? So apparently that's what a lot of organizations are using, a lot of researchers like SETI. They have telescopes with spectrum analyzers that are studying hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of stars closest to our sun. And they're looking for that exact signature because what it is, from what I read, it's outside of the range of error or man-made radio frequencies that have to do with the Doppler effect between transmitters and receivers. I guess something like that happens. And then also frequencies that can be put out by the sun. They know exactly which spectrum to look at, or which frequency to look at on the spectrum, which would be a signature of some intelligent life broadcasting a signal repetitively, so it's not changing. That I thought was really interesting. So what I want to do is just add that story to this. One thing I did research was that they're trying to do an all printed diode operating at 1.6 gigahertz right now with technology, and that's for the Internet of Things. And one interesting thing I read, there's my buddy Ringo, one of the interesting things I read was that they're printing these diodes with small antennas for a form of communication on the Internet of Things. Okay, so one thing that Colonel Alexander said at the end of that episode or that meeting was when Travis asked him, what do you think that was? He said, that's it trying to communicate with you. And what is it? He said, the thing that you guys are assuming is that you have things in control here. You don't. Whatever it is trying to communicate, and we're just not there yet. So I spoke to an engineer from Sandia Labs, and we talked about this for a while. And what he had mentioned was that's exactly it. That's the direction that we're going. People are trying to literally download their consciousness onto a hard drive. So if you can't send flesh and bone to another solar system or galaxy, even if you figured out light speed, it would still take millions of years to get to some of these places. But using radio frequencies, you could transmit human consciousness faster than the speed of light. So you could almost instantly be in some of these places. You'd have to download your consciousness onto something. So no matter what, it would take a long time, unless we figured out wormholes, Einstein-Rosen bridges, things like that. Portals, which is the coolest part about this whole theory. It's just a way to fold space and time and step from one point that's far, far away, light years away, step from where you're at into that point. You're taking a piece of paper, this is space, you've got a star system or a planet here, and Earth is over here, millions of light years away from each other, and you take space and you fold it, and then you punch right through. So it's just a quick, it's an A to B, but you've warped and manipulated space-time. They're actually trying to print these diodes, and they're using the 1.6 gigahertz frequency as a mode of communication. That was the whole point I was getting at, is they're putting an antenna on these things so that they can use it for communication. So what if something at Skinwalker Ranch has been trying this entire time to communicate with Travis and his team or the NIDS team when they were there, and now as tech is getting more and more advanced, they're starting to figure this out. We're really close, we're on the precipice of, and you know what, how do you read a frequency on a spectrum analyzer? Is there a way to pass information? Well, obviously, if they're going to use it for communication for the Internet of Things, there is some method. We're going to try to get some professionals in here to do some interviews so they can explain it in layman's terms to us, how you could pass a message on a 1.6 gigahertz frequency. And just had to pop in here and let you guys know that, since I brought up Skinwalker Ranch. and I couldn't wait any longer, so I'm putting it in this episode now. Now enjoy the rest of it. I think I may mention Skinwalker here in a second, but this is a little more in-depth with what's going on right now, and the fact that Colonel Alexander was there at the time back in the day, and that's the exact frequency. So we're going to try to buy a spectrum analyzer, nothing fancy, but something portable and battery powered that we can take back to that location where my dad saw this doorway open up. And when we spend the night there that night, we'll keep this thing on and we'll see if we can pick up that frequency. So I'm going to try to find one that's from like 1,000 or 100 kilohertz to 1.7 gigahertz. And that should be the only range I need. But what we're really looking for is 1.6. So this should be pretty fun. In India, you have a lot of that. And there are certain tones, certain frequencies of items that were carved into stone. There's pillars that make a certain frequency. And people believe that frequencies can adjust your chakras. They believe that it can enlighten you. They believe that it can open up a doorway to another world, another dimension. And shortly, I'm going to do an interview with a physicist to discuss Einstein-Rosen bridges, wormholes, and other dimensions, because they have made big claims in physics that these things are very possible. Mathematically, on paper, they are possible. So what's to say that they don't occur naturally? Whether it's accidental or it's some kind of lost knowledge, these two sectors of reality are coming together, they're merging. You have mythology and you have science, and those two things are starting to intersect when it comes to this kind of discussion. So I want to go through these one at a time. And Amaru Muru, that was number 1. Sardinia, that's number 2. All of them in Egypt. We'll go through, I'll just show you some images right now just so you can get a grasp on what these things look like. And you can go see these places. I'm not sure if you could, do experiments there. I'm sure that you could probably grease the skids and pay the guides there. But I've heard a lot of archaeologists and travelers say that you can pay these guys to take you into rooms that nobody's allowed in. They'll open doors that haven't been open for a long time. I think Billy Carson has done that quite a few times, and I'm sure a lot more have. It's awesome that they've got to experience these things, and then they share that information with us, and that's exactly what this channel is trying to do. I do want to recall one story that my father had, because he was kind of like a modern-day Indiana Jones in some ways. In Belize, he got to go to see the pyramids down there, and this was a long time ago. And when he did, a friend of his was a native. He was fortunate enough to meet an old-timer that took him into a hut, and it was near the pyramids. The old man moved some things out of the way, and on the floor was a carpet. He rolled the carpet up, and underneath that carpet was a piece of wood. He lifted it up, and there was an entrance to a little cavern, underground tunnel. And he took my dad into the tunnel, and they were able to go underneath the pyramid. Inside was ancient artifacts. Nobody was allowed to leave with anything. Back then there was no quick way to take a camera. Video cameras were massive. They fit on your shoulder. Probably weighed 25 pounds. There were no iPhones, Androids. There was no way to document these things, but I've heard him tell that story since I was a kid. I'm glad he didn't take any artifacts from there, because they should be put either in a museum or left with the native people from that location, because to them they're sacred. I don't care what religion you are, what you believe in. You got to pay homage to other people's beliefs if they believe something different than you. Now, the undertakings for something like this all around the world, these people, these tribes, these civilizations didn't even know about each other, as far as we know. They were separated by thousands of miles, a lot of them didn't have the capability nor the time to travel so far to spread these ideas. So how did all these civilizations around the world come up with the idea to carve these stargates or false doors or portals into solid stone? The precision is incredible. It looks like they were cut with laser technology, a lot of them. Some of them are very rough, but the theory that I have is that, they didn't just choose a place to carve them. Maybe in some places they did, but I believe that they possibly saw certain things happen. Here in New Mexico, we have a lot of petroglyphs carved into the stone or etched into the stone, and especially on the west side of Albuquerque, but there's a lot of places in New Mexico that have these things. There's a lot of spirals that are drawn above these pretty eerie looking figures. They look like monsters, basically. And you can kind of tell the difference between a human that's been carved, that's holding a bow or a spear, versus these giant, odd-shaped creatures with horns and long arms. I mean, they've found petroglyphs with, six-toed creatures, and they dwarf the humans in a lot of ways. So what were those things? Did they see something emerge from a stone? Did they see it emerge from the dark? At Skinwalker Ranch, there was a incident that happened there where basically it looked like a window opened up in the sky, pitch black, and it closed back up. And I can't remember if it looked like something came in or out, but that eerily reminded me of what happened to my dad in the Sandia Mountains. So here's a really cool thing that happened after I posted that video. A friend of mine had shared it with a friend of his who happens to be from the Hopi tribe. And that gentleman mentioned to him that the Sandia Pueblo Native Americans have an old story about a portal or a stargate in the Sandia Mountains. And it's really awesome because my dad didn't know about that. I didn't know about that. Philip didn't know about that. So when he told me that, my eyes were as big as saucers. I mean, I really freaked out. And so I'm trying to make a connection with this man to see if he knows any of the Sandia Pueblo Native Americans, so I can sit down and talk to maybe some of their elders, some of the guys that know this story, and put two and two together, like I've said. I respect their land, I respect their history and their culture, so obviously I have to tread lightly in these conversations, and by no means do I ever intend to disrespect, right? But I do want to share these things with the world, and that's why I'm talking about them now. And the best part about making a YouTube channel like this and putting it out there is that you can introduce people to each other that might have similar interests. You can really gain some knowledge from the elders of our world. And I think a lot of time us younger people hear them recount these stories from when they were young or what their elders had told them as they were growing up, and we kind of just slough it off and it's discounted. We're into other things. And the older you get, the more you start to pay homage and respect these stories, because there's something deeper to it all. As we go forward, hopefully with the connections that we gain and people reaching out to us to let us know about their experiences, we're going to dive deep into their stories. We're going to go to those locations and we're going to really make something happen with this. If you think about the possibility of this, it's pretty intriguing. I mean, during a lightning storm, when the atmosphere was changing, the water was pouring down. In my dad's situation, there was a granite boulder, and if you haven't researched piezoelectricity, look it up. When quartz crystal is placed under pressure, it creates electricity. So when lightning strikes, it creates not only electricity, a vast amount, but it also creates pressure. And water can transmit electricity. It's this giant field that's put out there. And I firmly believe that they might have just been in the right place at the right time to see something really fascinating. and terrifying. I'm sure there are some scientists and physicists out there trying to replicate these conditions. I just think there's a missing link somewhere. Like I've said before, I think that missing link might be a sound frequency. I've often thought about these people that go missing in the middle of the woods, just on a normal hiking trip or hunting trip. And it's something they've done dozens of times in their lives. And they're armed, they have a firearm, they're aware of their surroundings. These people have done it for so long, they're conditioned to those environments. So for something to get the drop on them and just remove them from our reality with no trace, nothing's found. Were they whistling a tune? Were they singing a song? Did they hit some note that was a perfect frequency in the perfect atmosphere at the perfect time and location? I've mentioned Dave Paulides quite a bit, and many of his stories have to do with people disappearing near water and granite. And it's interesting to me, that's what's totally rung a bell in my head. When I really snapped was when I remembered my dad's story and the fact that they had those exact conditions. It wasn't a body of water, it wasn't a river or a stream. It was a heavy downpour that filled the gullies, and it was nonstop for a while, long enough for lightning to strike, hit this rock, spread that electricity throughout these other boulders and cliff faces, and open up some kind of pitch black doorway with slight shadows, discoloration. Now Philip saw a little more than my dad did, and my dad said you could tell you could differentiate, there were certain aspects that were different colors. Philip said he literally saw things, people, flesh, and so they were obviously at different angles. Some of them might have been staring at this thing longer than others. I wish Wendy was still around, their other friend that was there, because he could have recounted his experience too. But nonetheless, they both saw that doorway open up, and the sound that it made, as they recalled, was like stones grinding against each other. So I have no idea what any of this means. I cannot wait until it warms up, because we're going to go camp out there overnight, and I'm going to do certain things like take tuning forks, EMF detectors, night vision, anything that I can do to up the chances of seeing something happen there. It's going to be eerie, I'm sure. It's easy to talk about now, but when we're out there in the pitch black, especially if it's raining, like I would like to do, what if something does open up? What are you going to do then, right? Are you going to hightail it and run? Or are you going to stand there and face it and see what happens? This is just another step. I wanted to put this idea out there to you if you haven't heard of these things, these doorways that are carved all over the world. I mean, they're inside pyramids, they're etched in stone walls that are out in the middle of the desert. And these civilizations carved beautiful structures on the face of giant boulders that weighed probably millions of tons, and they go nowhere. You know, as far as we know, they go nowhere. And that's the cool part. So let's see what happens next. Next episode, we're going to go into nightmares and night terrors. I've had quite a few in my lifetime, and recurring dreams, and things that kind of, have a lot of theories behind them. When you have a dream about a loved one that's passed away, are you really getting to connect with that person again while they're on the other side? Are they reaching out to tell you they're okay? Or is it just your imagination? So that's next on the list. This is going to be a shorter episode, but I don't want to bore people, so I'll catch you on the flip side, and in the meantime, let's play with the paranormal.
Just couldn't shut your mouth. You had a moment of doubt, then it all went south. You painted on the wall for all to see. Pain that you felt